BLOCKTALES.
Hello together. This is a new episode of BLOCKTALES. My name is Sarah. I'm the managing director of Blockchain Founders Group, and today Julia is with me. I'm super happy to have you here. And yeah,
Thank
maybe
you.
we can start with a short introduction.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. And it's funny how we reconnected through this. I mean, I think we met for the first time in person at one of the pizza events, right? Or maybe it was
I think
the
it was
Web3 conference. I actually don't
Mexico.
remember.
I
True,
think
the
it was
Mexico.
the
Yeah,
Mexico
yeah,
conference. Yeah, and we just
yeah.
we just met, and I think everybody spoke to each other and was you had been like full of energy, and I loved your energy, and so I think this is why we started talking to each other.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, very cool. I love your project. So I say that as not only as a podcast guest, but also as a podcast host. I launched my own podcast actually last
You
year, not on in
definitely
the
have to
Web3
tell us
space.
about that.
Yeah, maybe very quick to me. So my name is Julia. I'm actually not, professionally in the Web3 space per se. So I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but perhaps I would consider myself a Web3 enthusiast or like a somewhat curious person about it. My background is in the finance space. So I worked for the last 13 years in finance in various capacities at KPMG in corporate finance, at Morgan Stanley in capital markets, lived for quite some time abroad, and then moved into the space of investor relations. So investor relations, for those who don't know, it's essentially fundraising for listed companies. So once you IPO the company, you shall have a department in place that helps investors to understand the equity story and get the reportings on time and this kind of stuff. And that's what I've been doing for two tech unicorns in the last 6 years, for Delivery Hero and About You, so two German tech companies.
Very interesting.
One of the latter actually who also minted some NFTs. So that was actually, I will talk about that later maybe.
Oh yes, of course.
Also my first touch point on the NFT space. And since 2020, so sorry, 2022, so this year I actually have my own consultancy. So I have investor relations consultancy that's called Unicorn with J, and I help startups and scale ups, so late stage startups that are about to go to the stock market, with their journey, and trying to do that in a most innovative way, using also podcasting. That's also why I launched my own podcast format with my co-host from N26. It's called Street Tweets, and it's a podcast not on Web3, but it's on investor relations and fundraising. So if you're
It's so
curious, you can
cool because
check it
you're
out.
doing as well and talking about investor relations and the financials. I really love that. So I'm really happy you're doing another podcast. Yeah, thank you for your introduction. So the first question we always ask, and we always try to keep to that structure, is how would you explain your everyday Web3 life? I mean, the part of your life that belongs to Web3, to your grandmother.
Oh wow. um, Well, it's a tricky one. I would say it's building a product around communities. So I think, brands are trying to build communities and then trying to provide value to that community, and doing that by leveraging on blockchain technology. So technology being a technology that helps to bring that value to the people, and kind of almost democratizing the access to that, in very simple terms. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Maybe you can tell me what you think about it, but
No, I think it's so interesting because like it's so hard to explain the Web3
Mhm.
space to somebody who's really not into technology. And so I think it's always very interesting to ask that question and to kind of get the thoughts and the ideas people have, how they would explain to their grandmother or maybe grandfather. So,
Yeah.
because you already said like your first touch point was with Web3 was with NFTs, maybe let's
Mhm.
directly jump in and start with that. So, how did everything start for you, and why was it an NFT? Just tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. I think I have to go back actually to 2021. So end of 2021, I was working for About You in investor relations. And I kind of felt this entrepreneurial urge in me. So it was just like an impulse that I felt that I wanted to do something by myself. But I had no idea what this was. And I was just like exploring and brainstorming what kind of ideas. And Web3 always popped up, but I was like, I don't know what this is. And I was like, I wasn't very comfortable with not knowing anything at all, right? Because I was more in the finance space, as I said. So I was like, nah, I don't think that's for me. But then the opportunity occurred for one company that I joined as a co-founder, which was actually NFT, the company that I eventually invested in. And I thought about it to join them as a co-founder, but I think for me psychologically that was too much, like quitting a full-time job, going into full-time entrepreneurship, and then plus into a space that I don't know anything about, that I don't really feel comfortable at the time, was just psychologically too much. And then instead I actually decided to found something in this space where I have the network and I have the skills clearly built up from the last 13 years, which is eventually investor relations. So that was the first touch point. But actually now thinking back, during that time, funnily enough, as I was working for About You, they were also, I think it was beginning of 22, they were launching this NFT project as well, right? They're, how's it called again? I forgot how it's called. It's like they have their own virtual wardrobe, basically, or their own virtual fashion. Maybe I will think about it later how it's called. Anyways, I
Sorry,
forgot.
I also don't know the name, but just go on.
But the thing is, I think that happened roughly during that time, basically, when I already left. And, by this point, I also realized, okay, actually, it's a fairly, it's a big brand. It's like a big fashion brand, obviously. And I was like, okay, it's probably, you always say like probably nothing, but I was like, okay, there's probably something about Web3 that was sparking my interest. And that's eventually when I obviously stayed in touch with the company NFT and followed their journey and eventually invested in them as an angel investor in August 22. So just a few months ago.
But by the way, how did you get in touch with the founder? I mean, if you said there was no contact point for you to Web3, but then there was a founder and he already asked you to be his co-founder. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, that was just through personal network. I think so. I live in Berlin for everyone who doesn't know, but the community here, and I think actually whole Berlin is almost like a community. It's the startup community or the tech community is quite small. And, you go to meetups, you meet people, you go to a party or something, you meet people and you exchange. And maybe when you live in Frankfurt, people talk about banking and finance and this kind of stuff, maybe blockchain, I don't know. But here in Berlin, people talk a lot about the VC scene, fundraising, startups, and what is the new latest idea. And so it was just through like the community here on the ground.
Nice.
Yeah, very random.
Yeah, I think it's often like that you just meet some people and they are into some project and then you just get to know them and you think it might be interesting and then you start working on it. But you said you decided not to be his co-founder, but you decided to invest. So what kind of happened next in your Web3 path?
Yeah, so this was really the time when I then started. Okay, I was like, when I invest, I do want to obviously understand the space a bit better. And it was also the time when a lot of bigger brands, I mean, apart from About You, but also like, quite big brands were launching their own NFT projects, especially in the fashion space or lifestyle space. And, it was really almost every week there was something popping up. So I tried to keep up with that, especially from the perspective of NFTs and especially those projects that have clear utility behind it, because NFT,
How,
um,
how hard
sorry.
was it for you? No, because this is like you said you just started and then you said you're just trying to keep up with everything, but I think it's so hard at the beginning. So how was it for you? How did you try to keep up? What are your methods and how did you do that?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I'm always very busy. Like I'm getting very excited about things, and I'm trying to take on as much as I can, but also at the same time, that distracts me again from other things that I'm doing. So I have to be also quite conscious about my time and not getting too excited about things and then running in one direction and next day running another. But I did know that I do want to be informed about the space and at least have some basic knowledge to understand what is happening, especially if I did make an investment into a company. And it's just like subscribing to some newsletters, going to these events. I mean, here in Berlin, we have the W3 fund with these pizza events, for example, or
It's so cool what they
speaking.
are doing.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like building, being part of that community. And actually still vividly remember, and because we spoke earlier about your co-host Katharina Zeug, my very first Web3 event, like the very first physical Web3 event I went to, and I was like, I really was thinking, I was like, Oh my god, I don't know anything. Like all these people will think I'm an idiot. And it was the complete opposite. Like it was very. I mean, obviously, my knowledge was not very profound at the time, but everyone was super nice, super open, and welcoming. And I realized it's also apart from being an interesting space, it's also just a very nice place to be around. I don't know how you feel about it, but I really like it. I like the people there. Just
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the points why we decided to do this podcast, and this is something that really encourages me. Sorry, to stay in that space. That I meet so many nice, interesting, and so smart people. I'm
hmm
always happy if I go to the events. After a while, it's like you already know somebody, and then you're kind of getting
yeah.
you go there, you meet with some people. It's so nice. You can talk to them, but there are always new people, and they are always open-minded, trying to help you, trying to talk to you, and it's yeah, I feel very welcomed.
hmm
If I go to some of those events, it always feels it feels a little like coming home.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's nice once and that's actually was my first event. And I actually met Katharina at this event. It was like in the summer, just after I made my investment. And then the next events were already much nicer, right? Because then you know already some people, you have already spoken to some, they already know you, you have maybe things in common and it builds from there. So, yeah, I think it's super exciting. And for me, it's obviously not, professionally, I'm not necessarily in Web3. I wouldn't consider myself being in Web3 just yet professionally. But I would say I observe it from a close distance, and if ever an opportunity arises or will present itself, I will be ready.
Nice. So is it so NFT is like your first investment? Did you decide to make a second or third already, or is just observing at the moment? I mean, the market is a little critical at the moment. So what are you doing?
Yeah, it was my first investment in the Web3 space. I made a few other investments in the VC or angel space, let's say. But it's the first and only so far in Web3. And it was really about me putting the money where my mouth is. So, I think it's one thing if you say, yeah, I'm interested in Web3 and I'm reading about it, or, you just read blogs or whatever. But if you actually put your money into something, you really want to understand much, much deeper detail, right? Because I guess you shall, because you cannot really make informed investment decisions
You
otherwise. So
definitely should. Yes.
that was really my motivation to almost get deeper into the space, because then I had a clear motivation, like also monetary motivation to do so. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And so you said your current focus is like investments, and I think you founded your own company. It's called Unicorn, and I think it's also very interesting. Or yeah, it's very interesting for our audience or for me to get to know your story about founding your own company, because I think founding your own company as a woman in that space isn't easy as well, is it?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think being a female in the finance space, it's broad as finance space, right? Investor relations is essentially a mix of finance and communications. It's tough. I think it got better, but I thinking back 10 years ago when I was already working in banking, it was tough. Like, and I think things have changed by then. And founding a company in that space is also not easy. It's definitely the exception. But I also like it. I mean, it's also, I don't know. I don't really try to think so binary. I think it's more about the people behind it. Whether I don't care if it's man or woman. Um, but that's also, by the way, one thing I do like about the Web3 space is that I feel, at least, because it's a younger space, right? It's culturally coined by younger people per se, right? Maybe Generation Z, that is in general has more values around diversity and inclusion and being welcoming and stuff like that. So I think that is really also shaping the space, which I think is good for future generations to also maybe found something in a space, or you doing this podcast, right? So I think it's nice, but I don't know. I don't see myself disadvantaged either.
So, because I know that you got, and I really have to read it, you got the Investor Relation Rising Star 2022 award by IR Magazine Europe, and you won the first prize of the German Investor Relation Award. So, I think from an outside point of view, like your life and what you're doing looks pretty easy. Like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing, and I'm pretty sure you are. But the thing behind is, so I think it's not always straightforward. I think the way to win such a prize and to get to that point is like really difficult. So what are your struggles and difficulties behind that way?
Yeah, I had to laugh earlier because I don't know. I think that's true. From the outside, it always looks right when you also look on
It
Instagram
looks
or you see
amazing, it
someone's
looks
like
perfect.
everyone is always like, okay, this looks perfect or whatever. And I think you have this on LinkedIn, right? You have it from the professional point of view. You have it on Instagram from maybe more a looks point of view or lifestyle point of view. Um, but I think that's also only always the side that someone brings forward, I guess, that you see, right? I mean, I think for me, what is good and bad, I think there's always good and bad in everything, but I'm very curious about a lot of things. I have a lot of ideas like constantly. But then executing on one and staying focused, I think it's is difficult. So I always want everything at the same time and immediately. And so that's why I also cannot go all in Web3 because that would mean at the same time I cannot do unicorn anymore in a profound way. Um, yeah, so I think that's kind of the struggle, I guess, that comes with that. But I learned to live with this, and I see it more as a benefit because at the same time, Web3 also gives me inspiration to think bigger and beyond the usual boundaries of the typical finance boundaries that you would go. And as I said, maybe one day I will actually end up in Web3 and combine my finance knowledge with that space. So um, I think there's always good and bad in everything.
Yeah, understand. Yeah. So I think we said it in another episode already. Like time is like the biggest enemy,
Yes, yeah,
especially if
yeah,
you're in
totally.
the Web3 space. So for me, it's always like I want to know so many things, and I want to read, and I want to listen, and I want to go through. But time is just always running out, and
Yeah, yeah.
decide what to do and where to focus on. And so, because you just said maybe you will end up in a very positive way in the Web3 space, what are your thoughts at the moment? So, I mean, Web3 2022 was like quite a difficult phase. And I mean, you're deep into the finance area and the finance part. And if you look, or if you, yeah, what are your thoughts on the year 2023? And if you combine your knowledge about finance and Web3, what do you think will happen? Or what do you think, yeah, what is a good or what is a negative scenario?
You mean now with regards to Web3 or finance or both?
Maybe both.
Yeah. I mean, 22 was, I think, tough for like startups. I mean, I see this more from a startup and fundraising angle, right? Or like also the scale ups that are looking to go to market and raise capital. So I think that was a really tough year with changing macro environment. You know, we had wars, we had inflation, we had rising rates, like everything that's, let's say, counterproductive for achieving high valuations and getting easy cash from investors. But I think at the same time, it's good to reset the market and actually really go down to very profound business models and what is actually working. With which business models can you make money and which ones are worth funding. And I think so in 23 we will see more of actual real world utility behind it. Projects that maybe would have gotten funding last year will not get funding this year, but I think you will get like a more selected market of companies that will
For
get
sure.
funding and projects also in the NFT space. And
Yes.
that's why I also found NFT so interesting because it was not about an NFT community or something or project that is based upon just. I'm not trying to this great like project that are only doing art or only build around like an artist or something, but I think they are trying to put utility, like real-time utility. For example, I did a project with the NH Hotel group to put like real utility that you can actually trade in exchange for the NFT into the token. So it's something that gives you a real-time utility, and I think those projects will rather flourish. And I think also in terms of the Web3 space, anything will become more mass adopted. So I think we already see big brands going into that space, but I think also smaller brands will start seeing the benefit of it and trying to jump on that train, so that mass adoption will happen. So that's my humble outlook for 23. But I also think maybe one last point on that is that technology is going faster and faster every time. I mean, when we think about the internet, how long it took to actually get mass adopted, or also social media. But I think as a technology, also the generations that are adopting this are, doing so at a much quicker speed. I even think like in, I don't know, just a few years, this could be a real, like a technology that will be in everyone's usage,
Yes, yes,
if
yes.
that makes
For
sense.
me, a very interesting example is sometimes like PayPal, because nobody questions how PayPal works and what's the technology behind it. Just works and people use it. And I think something similar will happen for at least some of the Web3 technologies, that it will be life changing for at least some things, but people would not even know, or won't know that there is Web3 technology behind that. And so this
Hmm.
is when mass adoption like fully works. But I think it's like, I think it will unfortunately take some more years until we are really yeah, until mass adoption really took place. So I think it might take a while. But what is like the most important aspect of Web3 and blockchain for you? So why do you think it's a great technology, and why do you believe in it, and why do you think it's important that people go to that space, that development takes place, and everything is like going forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really that you can own your own content. So, just from the perspective, for example, you go on social media and you're publishing, maybe you're a YouTuber and you're publishing videos, right? And this is maybe even a business for you and you're making money off those videos. But essentially, you never really own those videos because the videos are essentially stored on an external platform that's called YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And I think having a technology in place where you can actually own your own content, or you can have a direct connection to your own community and can give them the tools or the services that you want them to get. So I think that's something super powerful, and I totally see the value behind it. And yeah, I think that's like the main thing why people should be interested in it. And I think also in general, I mean, it was with me as well. It can be a bit daunting because it's a very technical topic, and it's also something where I had no idea about, like, at all. Like, I'm really not someone who's super technical, I would say, like, despite
Me not
working in a tech
either.
sector. But I think what I would really encourage everyone is just like on a very high level, and the information is out there, right? It's you can really access it. Like, just get into it and just try to understand it. And if it is not for you, then that's fine. But I think if it's interesting, and that was the case for me, I found it like when you grasped it, and it was so interesting for me that I continued to read up on it. And I think one thing that I always read as well is that blockchain and investing into crypto, for example, is something that really can democratize wealth, like coming again from a finance
Absolutely.
perspective. Um, so I mean, before, when you have really a division between institutional investors, so those that are rich enough, let's say, or institutions that are in the space, they have always a structural advantage um, in front of like retail investors, because they can already invest in companies before they're public and so on. So I think with crypto you can really democratize that wealth distribution. So I think I personally would say, like, I mean, although at the moment the outlook on crypto and so it's a bit daunting, but I think I would still encourage everyone to at
Tricky,
least look into
yes.
it.
Yeah, but this is quite interesting because, like you said, normally they're in the huge investors, they are going first to market, and then the retail investors, they are coming like some years later, sometimes some months, some years later. But in the Web3 space, it's kind of different. Because the
Hmm.
retail investors, so the small people who are really interested in that space, they have been there first, and the institutional investors, they are still like trying to get into the space. Some are already in, some of them are not. Some of them are still waiting, for example, for MiCA regulations. But the retail investors are first that time, and I think
Hmm.
this is really interesting. And you said like
Yeah.
you would advise everybody to just give it a try and see whether it's for you or whether it's not. So, what are you, if somebody really wants to start from the scratch, what would you advise? What are your thoughts if somebody wants to start? What should he or she do?
I mean, I'm really someone who learns a lot through entertainment, I would say. So, and I think there are some really great sources out there. Like go on LinkedIn, follow some people that you would recommend. I mean, there's some very big ones that talk very high level about investing in crypto or Web3, something like Gary V, for example, or Tom Billieu also has some great content. Or also you have some in the German space. I mean, you are doing now podcasts, listening to some podcasts. There's this podcast from Victoria Cliche and Marvin Savigny. I hope I spell the names right. I found this very interesting. It's very hands on. It's not super technical. It's more about the use cases, for example, of Web3. So I think there's a lot of content already out there that you could utilize on either it being on social media or it being on podcasts. Um, yeah, let me think if there's anything else. And then also I think just in person events, right? Joining these
Yes.
communities, like I think that actually brings you even further probably than doing your own little research in your own room. But going to meetings, meetups, going to these events, pizza events, for example, that I went to, and then actually meet people and speak to people and see how do they think about things, and they can challenge your worldview. And that's what I found super powerful.
Yes, and I think people are very open with sharing information. So if I go to one of these events or conferences, I'm always having my mobile phone really close to myself, and I'm always like trying to write down. If somebody tells me something new, I'm just directly googling it, trying to find out, and I'm always having like a list if I come from those events with interesting people and interesting topics. And like I
Hmm.
already said, people sharing their information. So it's not that you have to dig and dig and dig. It's quite easy. People tell you about the experiences and what they think, and if there are some like new tools and new ideas, and it's really easy to get information. I think the only thing is you really have to do it. There's nobody like coming to get you. You really have to go out and just do it. You really have to start.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of priorities and focus, right? But I think I consider myself as an identity as a person who's curious and open minded and so on. And then I was asking myself the question, like, well, if I consider myself that person, I shall at least give it a try. And if I don't like it, then I can say at least, okay, I'll try it. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to priorities and who do you want to be, right? If you want to be a person in the future that is at the cutting edge of technology, you for sure shall read about it. But if you say, that's not really for me, have other priors, that's also fine. But just live in line with that decisions.
Totally agree. So, what would be the one topic you really would like to know more about it, but I don't know, maybe there was no time or something like that. So, what is the topic you're really curious about, but you did not start learning in the Web3 space?
Okay, I was wondering because there's a lot of topics
No,
out
no,
there.
no. It's like because I think you learn a lot, especially about NFTs. I think this is what like your first point, your starting point.
Mhm.
And I think there's so much more out there to learn, and it's maybe there's nothing, but is there one topic you're really curious about? And yeah, there was just no time until now.
Um, I think the DAO principles are also super interesting. So, I mean, especially given that I'm building up a consultancy, right? How can DAOs aid to build up, decentralized organizations? Maybe that's something, but again, that's something that's I didn't have time enough to dig into it, and there's just so many things on my plate, so I never really found the right timing to look into it. But I think that could be something interesting as well as just generally metaverse. I mean, metaverse, I think there's no real definition about it, and what will it actually become at one point? Is it a lot of like AR, VR things, and everyone running around with like glasses or something,
NFT?
or and I think there's also a lot of ideas that I would have how to combine my knowledge in investor relations and the finance space with these topics. Um, but let's see. I mean, there's a lot of space that I don't know about a lot. Like I really just started with NFTs because this was the thing that was most graspable. You say that like this, like it's most grasping for me. But yeah, I think there's a lot more to explore for sure.
Absolutely. So, Julia, we are already coming kind of to the end.
That was
So,
quick.
like two last questions. So, the very last, or the second last question is there anything else you would like our audience to know, or any last thoughts, or anything you really would like to talk about?
um, No, I mean, I think, especially as a woman, I mean, I think it's great that you're doing this podcast, honestly. And that's also a motivation why I did, or one of the motivations why we did a podcast in the finance space, right? Because I think motivating more women to get into the space is super crucial to shape how the industry will look like in 5 years and 10 years from now. And, maybe getting more founders into the space, or at least more people that are curious about it, and allowing them to participate on that wealth creation or on that innovative technology. So I think that's really cool and innovative thing that you're doing, and wishing you all the best for that.
Thank you so much. And we are always trying to close with the last question. And it's like, tell us your favorite, in case you have one, your favorite crypto story. And because BLOCKTALES, like once upon a time, is there
Okay.
something that comes to your mind? Any nice experience,
Mm,
any thoughts?
um, I mean, maybe. I mean, it's just like an anecdote. It's not a crazy funny story. So
It doesn't need to
it's
be
just
very
like,
crazy. It's just nice.
yeah, it's just for me. I mean, I remember when I bought my first NFT. You obviously need a wallet, right? So, and I mean, I always considered myself quite savvy in the sense of like, yeah, I have like my finance stuff, I have it together, and then I had to create this wallet, and I think I sent like $1,000 or something to that wallet, and you send it just to like that string of numbers, and I was really scared that this money would not arrive, and I was like,
You?
this UI UX, like, it's not good. It's very not intuitive. There was a lot of, although now obviously looking back, it's easy, and I've used it many times again, but it's not. At the first time I felt very uncomfortable, and I think if we can get to a place when this becomes much more intuitive, and it's much more, the UI UX is nicer and more user friendly, I think more people will also get comfortable around it. And yeah, that was just like my 2 cents.
I totally feel you. So the first time I did it, I was sending like a very small test transaction, but then the
Smarter.
second was a big transaction. But the first one worked, but while I did the second transaction, I was still very nervous. I mean, it was exactly the same address, but I was like, oh my God, what I'm doing, and is it working? And I totally feel you. So, Julia,
Yeah,
thank you so much for being our guest. I'm really happy to have you here, and I think you're a really inspiring
thank
person.
you.
It was a
Thanks, likewise.
Yeah, it was amazing talking to you. Thank you so much, and yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed the new episode of Block Tales. And thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.